guess as we think about a digital transformation strategy, and we have to think about, well, what are some of the issues that will solve? And I think that there's always been a focus on digital transformation within the Assembly. We're a relatively young Assembly, about 20 years old now. So that has always kind of been a core part of our functionality. So whenever Mark was talking about, the picture from 1908, that is not where we are. We're kind of just new there. And I think that certainly with the pandemic, there's been a greater demand for digital transformation, and this demand has been at a greater pace. There's a desire for things to happen and to happen quickly. And this is especially kind of centered around the desire to be able to access systems and information in a remote manner, and that potentially for members, that is in terms of plenary and also committee sessions, and for staff getting access to the information they need to be able to facilitate these sessions as well. And that is probably taken us away from where our core digital transformation had been, which had been very much focused on systems and combining those together to kind of a different track, but still in terms of digital transformation and this remote access. I think the big challenge for everybody in this is how we get staff and members to access systems and access the information that they need to get access to in a secure and an accurate way. So what systems are they allowed to access, and how do we provide that access in a secure and an accurate way that they can make use of? I think some of the other challenges as well, certainly, and I know some other of the presenters have mentioned that, is about the fear of digital transformation. And I think we have to be aware of that. In anything that we do, we are always working with people. And we can build systems and we can put our systems in place, but unless we are able to take those people along with us, that will then cause problems and can actually lead to major issues for those projects and those programs. So it's really important, and the challenge is how do we engage staff and also members and bring them where we're trying to go. The expectation is there as well, and I've noticed since the pandemic that there's a greater expectation for this transformation, and a very much it's kind of maybe driven by younger members of the Assembly and parliamentarians. So as we've said, as we think about providing remote access for these people, there's a lot of challenges there as we seek to move maybe from a LAN infrastructure where it was all kind of on-prem to much more of a cloud environment. There's all those questions that we have, and that was some of the stuff that we dealt with towards the end of the conference yesterday in terms of security and the increased costs that potentially we would have, and the penetration testing that would need to be carried out. We need to maintain those high levels of security. We need to think about how do we access systems remotely, but in a secure way. Also, the challenge that we have is we have to think about the adoption of new software and what software should be used. Should it be a software package that we purchase from outside the organization, or do we do some work internally and use our internal development teams to work alongside that? And often this can take time, and it can take time to develop a product, but it can also take time to go out and select the most appropriate product that we have. And then the questions are, how do we, in our environment, how do we keep all the software up to date? How do we train staff? How do we keep them moving forward with the new ways of presenting information, communicating information, accessing that information? And then, as well as that, whenever we're trying to update it, what is the relationship between some of the systems that we have? Can we update one system, and what impact will that have on another system? So those are all the kind of the challenges as we try and move forward. Can we move all of our systems forward, or do we have to do it in a piecemeal fashion? in this digital transformation, whenever we're moving into this new modern world, there's loads of questions about governance and how do we secure that information. You know, as we think about information flows, how do we make those information flows have governance built into them? You know, in the past, maybe we have relied upon emails for members to submit questions by deadlines. But whenever you move that online, how do we record that? And how do we make sure that that information is recorded in an accurate way so that the deadlines and timelines are met? We're looking to, the question that we have and the challenge that we always have is how do we enhance greater public interaction with the information, and what are the mechanisms that we can put into place so that we can involve the public and there's actually a greater sense of participation in the organization that we work for, and that how that impacts people's lives and how they can be part of it. And then the other thing that I've certainly noticed during the pandemic, when a lot of people are working remotely, is the commonality of approach and how business areas in particular can secure that commonality of approach. And even with members, there's very much a diverse way of working. Sometimes one member will work one way, another member will work another way. I'm sure that we can all identify with that. And the challenge for us is how we can then provide systems that will cope with all of that. So we have been able to work through some of these areas. Members, what we found is that members of the legislature want to be able to access information via every device, and that they want it to be seamless. Not too many click-throughs. They want to be able to play with the data themselves. They want to be able to take this information and share it with others easily and communicate with not only with their colleagues, but also their constituents. On the back of that as well, there's a desire for parliamentary staff to move forward, but at the same time, there could be some fear over how do we access this software? How do we get trained? Is there going to be a change in my role? How does that affect my job? And so there's kind of a two-way process there, I suppose, probably with staff as well as members. And so what we've been able to achieve over the past 20 years, as I've said, is we've taken the approach of a system called the AIM system, which is the Assembly Information Management System. And this system is a centralized database system. It's developed in-house and it's been based on the Canadian government's PRISM system. It's a single repository for all our procedural information recorded throughout the whole organization. And it's a single back end that we have and that we've been able to work and then interface the multiple procedure applications off the back of that, such as AIM's Business, which deals with all the plenary information in terms of motions, amendments, lobby divisions, etc. Assembly questions and all the rules that are held by members. It deals into committees as well, so it holds information about the meetings, information about witnesses, agendas, etc. We also then took a decision to introduce a new system called the ECP, which is the Electronic Committee Pack, and what that does is that basically produces committee packs. So instead of clerks and staff having to print out these packs and give them to members, members now receive via a tablet device all their committee packs for the following week, which, as you can imagine, as we talked about yesterday, cuts down tremendously in the amount of paper that we use within the organization. We've integrated AIM's Hansard as well. So there's a now connection into the official report of the Northern Ireland Assembly, and it's all linked. And also then the AIMS portal, which is linked to our website, and that public and other organizations are able to get access to that information via the portal and pull that out. And also we've got open data web services, which we can then use to interface with external organizations. Our main emphasis is that we create once and publish everywhere. And that is the backbone of everything we try and do. so that the business areas only have access to certain fields, which means that the information is validated across the system. And as well as the various applications, as I've said, we're able to publish that on the web in various formats so that other people, such as journalists, external developers, lobby groups, etc., can get access to that information. So that is where we were before the pandemic broke out. And that our desire to continue that digital strategy, even though it's kind of been focused very much more on remote access, we still want to strive forward with that digital transformation. And the new developments that are coming up look at member self-services application. So that is allowing, moving forward, probably in tune with the desire now to go remote access, is being developed in-house to allow members to submit and manage assembly questions and plenary motions and amendments via mobile devices and computers from wherever they are, which will make it an awful lot more user-friendly for the members, and that they can access a lot of this information themselves. We're also developing an e-laying application, which will allow other government departments and non-departmental bodies to provide information and documents to the Assembly as well. And the other areas of digital transformation that we're looking at are the start of the use of business intelligence software, and specifically amongst our researchers, how they maybe take their information and provide it and present it to members and other external bodies in a different way than they've had in the past. Rather than papers and Excel documents, they're now looking to use business intelligence software. And a lot of that work is done then in conjunction with the IS office, is where I work. And so I would work alongside those business areas as a connection to see how can we best serve them and how can we best work together to meet their strategy and meet their requirements. And then also we're working on the members portal, which is currently being developed, which is almost a one-stop shop for members. So that members will be able to remotely access this information, all the information that they require, rather than it being in an area where staff and members are all accessing that information. We're taking all the information that members require and putting it into one portal that members will be able to access, and it hopefully be an awful lot more streamlined for them, and they'll be able to use that remotely. Probably in terms of looking at the digital legacy and what that has meant for us, just to close, I think there's probably 4 points that I would like to make on that. And that is, there is a commonality of expectation. And I mean by that is that what we're finding is that people can access information from home in their personal lives via their own tablets or via their own devices. There's an expectation now that they should be able to do that in their own work life. And so there's a desire then to be able to access all this information when they need it and when they require it. So that is a real pressure on, I think, any organization, and that is one of those expectations that needs to be managed, and how we move forward with that. Certainly the digital transformation that we have seen in the past 2 years, where people have moved from being very much focused on work, you go into the office every day, to now you're working collaboratively online via online meetings, has had a massive impact on how we work. And so those expectations then have to be managed in terms of whenever they come back and look at the systems that they're working with. Secondly, I think during the pandemic, we were putting in a massive new piece of hardware into the system. It was a new phone system. And I find that that has changed the concept of training tremendously. And in the past, we would have thought that actually you need to take your users and you need to put them in the classroom-based training over a certain period of time. But actually what we have found with the rollout of Teams for collaboration, with the rollout of the new phone system, actually people are an awful lot more resilient in terms of training than potentially would have been seen in the past, and are able to pick things up. Now, that's not to say we take away training completely, not at all, but actually it challenges our view of training and how we've done training in the past. and how we potentially need to make it an awful lot more accessible to users whenever they need it and however they need it. So it's not necessarily just classroom based anymore, but it's actually an awful lot broader than that. Then there's also, we find, is that there's probably increased challenges for staff recruitment. And that's especially going back to what Mark was saying, that's probably especially in the field of software development for us, but also resources all around. You know, there's huge pressures now to have all of this development done. And it's the challenge of trying to get people to come in and to be able to do that in-house. And that is always difficult, especially in a pressurized environment that we find in Northern Ireland, where there is a massive demand for IT staff in particular. And then the last one is that very often we find that the users that we're working with look for ease of use and they want access remotely, but very often they don't necessarily want to have to do all the steps that means. Whenever you work on your corporate LAN and you're in your office, it's a lot easier. You just log onto your PC and you can work away. But whenever you're working remotely, there's all those other challenges of security. And we find that sometimes that isn't necessarily what people are up for, so that whenever you have to bring on the extra layers such as multi-factor authentication, etc., that is always a challenge as well to bring the people along with you.